welcome to this final session in our Lead Small training as we help to understand what does it mean to help kids and their families find real faith. And in this final session, we're going to talk about what does the future look like? Not just what happens in your group, but how, as we say, do we move them out? How do we engage their faith with a bigger story? No matter the age, how do we help them see that there's something far greater than just being part of a safe little small group? And that's huge. You've built that relationship, you've poured into them, but now we all have to be willing to let them have a part to play in that as well. And so we're going to take a look at a short video that talks us through what does it mean to move them out.
From day one, your job as a small group leader is to move your few out beyond the circle of your group. It may sound a little contradictory when you pair this idea with the others we've talked about. After all, why should we spend our time creating a space where your few can feel safe and comfortable, a space they want to be, if we're going to try to push them out of it? And in a small way, you're correct. We want our groups to be safe places where kids and teenagers are excited to be. We want our groups to be a place of encouragement and growth where our few are challenged to do more than settle for what they think they're capable of. We want all of those things and so much more. But if we're not careful, the circle that our groups exist in can put boundaries on their experiences. Your goal is not to create a group where you invest your time and attention in a few kids and teenagers in order to convince them that the circle is where life stops. Why? Because when they move outside of the circle, they are free to engage with a story that is much bigger than just their story. And you can't do this fifth and final lead small principle effectively if you haven't put in the time and effort required to do the other four. So how do we move our few out of the circle we've spent time trying to build? We start the process from day one. First, move them to someone else. Research shows that a kid who has 3 or 4 committed adult influences in his or her life will have a greater chance of sustaining a mobilized faith than kids who don't. This is why it's so important to move your few out to other people where they can form connections. If your kids or teenagers start connecting with another adult besides you and it bothers you, get over it. It isn't about you. It's about discipling kids towards real connection with God and with people. And the more adults you help them connect to, the bigger their concept becomes of who God is, because they will see Him through other adults. Second, move them to be the church. Why are you a small group leader? Because you want to engage in the mission of God and to connect your life with others. Because you've been poured into. And you know that the purpose of being poured into is so that you can pour out into others. This idea is true for your few too. Inside of the group is where they are poured into. Outside of the group is where they pour themselves out. So move them to be the church. Move them towards ministry. Move them towards loving others and serving others, and practicing how to put others first. Move them towards experiences that will shape their perspectives on other people and will broaden their spiritual horizons. Move them out so that loving others becomes a part of their DNA, and so that their faith becomes a living thing. Third, move them to what's next. Transitions can be tough on people, no matter how old or young you are. And part of your job as a small group leader is to do what you can to prepare your few for their next steps. We may be tempted to see some of these transitions as small in comparison to others, but we have no way of knowing how anxious or worried or excited our few are about changes. Moving to the next grade or small group can be a source of fear. Graduating high school unlocks a world of opportunity and also a world of questions. Starting at a new school can be scary. Moving to a toddler bed can be scary. So be prepared to ask yourself, what can I do to help carry them through this? If we don't take the time to think through transitions that our few are going through or will go through, then we're setting them up to get disconnected when it is most critical. Don't assume that your kids aren't anxious about change. Don't assume that your high schoolers are adults and ready to tackle the world on their own. When you move your few out to what's next, you are setting them up for the long haul. From the time they show up in your world or ministry, kids and teenagers are packing their bags. It's a fact of life, and time passes in a blur. But you have the chance to influence what your few pack in their bags. So what are you going to do with that influence? What are you going to encourage them to pack? They need other adults who are willing to show up for them and speak into their world. They need opportunities to see their faith in action as they experience the difference between attending church and being the church. And they need as many guiding hands as they can hold on to while they move from one phase of their life into the next. In other words, they need people like you to move them out of the comfortable circles and teach them that they are capable of big things. You can't do this for every kid, but you can do this for a few.
That is so true. That you can't do this for every kid. None of us have the capacity, but you can do it for your few, which is the commitment we're ultimately asking you to make as we finish out this lead small training and understanding what does it mean to engage your few's faith with a bigger story. And I hope you understood that the investment and the time and the energy that you put into your small group isn't just to keep that small group together. And it would be awesome. And it's not even just to build a relationship with your few, but it is to help them to do the same thing. This is how God grows his kingdom. Is by, as we would say, discipling a few so that they can disciple a few. This is the model that Jesus used. That's why he had 12 disciples, and those disciples had disciples. We don't refer to them, obviously, as disciples in this. We simply refer to them as your small group, and you are their leader. And as their leader, it is your job to help move them to something more, to help move them out. And so let's think about a few questions that will help you to think about what does that look like. First, what types of adults are your few naturally connected to? Now, here's the thing. If you get to know your few, you get to know things they like, things they enjoy. And that may not be things that you like or enjoy. And it may also mean that you will not be their small group leader for the next season. But you may know someone who would be awesome at doing that. If you don't like sports, but you have that boy who all he ever talks about is sports, and you have someone in your circle that loves sports, maybe you look at that person and say, I've got a boy or some boys who are moving into this season and they could use someone just like you. See, this is how God moves in the lives of people. Or maybe you're not into fashion, but you've got that girl or those girls, that's all they ever talk about is the clothes they wear or the way they do their hair or their makeup. And you get the opportunity to connect them with someone who loves that just as much as they do. That's where you start moving them out and connecting them to that adult or that student that would impact them at an even greater level. Now, what could you do with your group to help them regularly, that's important, take ownership of their faith and exercise being the church? That's a mouthful. Here's what we're saying. What could you do to help your few know that they are a vital part of the church? Now that's going to look different depending upon the age. For some, for your youngest, it may be encouraging their families to have their kids as part of things. Like, example, a baby dedication. That child, that baby may never know they were a part of it, but their family definitely will know that they are a vital part of the church because of that. Now, it may mean that you've got a group of 5th grade boys or 5th grade students. You could encourage them to help clean up around the church, to have ownership of that. You could encourage them to help serve in younger age groups as they move into middle school. You could encourage them to serve alongside their families as part of this. Because once they have ownership, statistics prove that that is the staying factor that will keep them engaged in their faith far beyond any elementary, middle school, or high school ministry. So we want to find ways that we can help you to help your few take ownership of the church. And finally, what are a few of the big transitions or milestones coming up in the lives of your few? You want to talk about having an impact? Show up to something big in the life of a child, or help a parent think through what does that look like. If you have a group of fifth graders, think through, and we'll help you as leadership think through this too. What does it look like to promote them into the next stage of ministry? If you have a preschooler and they're moving into kindergarten, that rocks a parent's world. How can you help them to transition well, whether that's you continue to lead their small group or you continue to connect them to someone who can? Here's the thing. When we start to do these things, when we start to lead small, guess what? That's when we help kids find real faith, and that's when God's kingdom thrives. Thank you so much for walking with us through all 5 of these videos, for understanding what our desire is when it comes to leading small and impacting those who are part of Kidlife for all eternity. Now, your next step is going to be someone reaching out to you and asking you, will you be willing to commit to this for the next season? And we ask you to prayerfully consider that. And if your answer is yes, that is awesome. If your answer is I'm not sure, let's talk more. Ask us questions. Ask that leader questions about what does that mean and where can we help you to bridge the gap. And guess what? Even if Kidlife isn't the place for you, we know that you have a story that God wants to use to impact lives for all eternity. And so we're excited about what that means and what it looks like for you to hopefully be a part of Kidlife. And as we always love to say, never forget, God is crazy about you.